You gotta have it. You gotta have it. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have it. You gotta have it. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have it. You gotta have it. You gotta have knowledge for life.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for being here. I know that the people here, you guys have noticed how African American writers are taking center stage around the world. We have books by Michelle Obama, Jacqueline Woodson, Jasmine Ward, Colston Wetherington, Margot Lee Shelterly, Michael Denzel Smith, and Roxane Gay. Of course, I can go on and on, but those are just a few. And those books are all flying off the shelves. Those are excellent writers, and they are informing people about African Americans in up-close and in humanizing ways. Our guest today is my good friend, Nita Wiggins, and she has written a memoir that does the same thing. She writes about her hopes and desires, her vulnerabilities, and her failures. And while it is her story, she argues that it is also representing what happens to an entire generation, her generation born in 1964 and after. The book is called Civil Rights Baby, My Story of Race, Sports, and Breaking Barriers in American Journalism. In it, Nita lifts the curtains of what she labels an economic lynching, and that is a term that she coined. She says that economic lynching affects anyone who has been othered and marginalized and diminished in the workplace. Nita comes to us from Paris, France, where she lives now and she teaches journalism. But her trail stretches from Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama to Dallas and Seattle, and even runs through our own backyard in Huntington, West Virginia and Southern Ohio, where she worked at WSAZ-TV. Nita is going to read from Civil Rights Baby, and she also will discuss the issues that she raises, and she will answer your questions. And then she will also sign her book over here when she's finished. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to our town, Dayton, Ohio, to Nita Wiggins. Here's Nita.
I'm here on the stage with you in Dayton, Ohio, to talk about probably the worst day of my adolescent life. The day is so devastating that I buried it from my memory. It disappeared for more than 30 years. But I had to recall that incident in writing Civil Rights Baby. So let me take you back there. I'm in Augusta, Georgia. It's the spring of 1977. I am a 12-year-old girl who is striving, always striving, putting forth the best effort to do anything that is within my power. It was at age 8 that I developed a business plan. It's a life plan, actually. And the idea was to land a job reporting on the Dallas Cowboys, living and working in Dallas, Texas. So I'll read from the book now so that you understand 8-year-old Nita Wiggins and then adolescent Nita Wiggins. I viewed my elementary school days as my springboard to journalism. So I took seriously my job of going to school and getting home promptly to review the lessons and do my homework. I would zip along on my blue bike, a bike with a white banana seat and high-rise chopper handlebars. The multicolored plastic streamers hanging from the handlebars would catch the wind as I pedaled. Focus straight ahead, always straight ahead. From 3rd grade on, I couldn't wait to return to our home on Threadneedle Road in the mostly white neighborhood, the Montclair neighborhood. I'd reach home between 2:30 and 3 p.m. thanks to the easy bike ride on the sidewalks. After a snack of buttered and maple syrup-soaked cornbread, it was down to business on 7 hours of homework that I would do on a typical day. I would do 3.5 hours before dinner and another 3.5 hours after dinner. On the evenings when it was my turn to wash dishes, I would be delayed a bit, but I would still meet my study goals. Social studies or history was first. I concentrated on the new terms that we'd learned in the reading assignment. For science or biology, I drew plants or practiced the chemical reaction equations from the periodic table. Simply put, whatever we did in the classroom became my afternoon and evening entertainment. I don't remember ever having to tell you to do your homework. My father has said to me numerous times. And I didn't have to check your homework because I knew it was right, my dad would say. When I had completed the day's assigned exercises, I would work ahead. On one occasion, I was 4 chapters ahead of the health assignment. I loved drawing and coloring the detailed illustrations of human anatomy. I always wanted to have the correct answer when called on in class. That's because during 3rd and 4th grades, I was only one of 2 black kids in my elementary school. That's 1 of 200. I didn't want to stand out any more than I already did with my brown skin, my textured hair, that I often wore into pigtails. But it's in that setting that I suffered a painful and bewildering moment in 6th grade. The culprit, not a peer, the kids were never unkind to me, but it was a white music teacher. A woman in her early 30s who wore a short page boy hairstyle came to teach us once a week. We students would sit in a semicircle facing her. She would call out a page number and we would turn to that song in our music book. However, one day I sensed something was about to go wrong. I spied the words Negro Spiritual on the page in the right-hand corner above the first bars of music. Knowing that my birth certificate proclaimed me a Negro baby, the label of the song made me instantly self-conscious. I quickly became alarmed. Nita's going to show us how it's done, said the music teacher. The gazes of more than a dozen young pairs of eyes turned from her and landed on me. I was mortified. Negro spiritual? What do I know about that? I'd always been a dancer, someone who uses the body for expression, but not at all a singer. And while my nuclear family enjoyed many interests, music was not one of the top interests. Come on, the teacher coaxed. Her lips curled in a closed-lipped smile, but her eyes were not smiling. I wanted to vanish, to vaporize, to do anything other than sit there and perform for my schoolmates. I sat frozen and mute, as if my silence would end the humiliation. After my refusal to perform and to show how it's done, the teacher leaned over from her seated position and placed the arm of her record player on the disc that she had brought with her. She had also brought not only the record player, but everything she needed to demonstrate the song. It made me wonder why she asked me to demonstrate the song's delivery. As the music played, I tried to follow the printed lyrics, but I could not focus. My eyes were bleary. Nor could I catch on to the rhythm coming from the record player. The teacher's request had made me feel isolated, attacked, challenged, powerless. I felt unprotected in my own school, abused by this employee of the school system. Because of this, I found no enjoyment in the music lesson. The rest of the day is lost to me. Today, my family says I recounted the event at home, but with a twist. You told us you blew it out of the water, my family members have said. It's not likely. I still can't carry a tune. It's more likely I created a fiction that made me the hero. A fiction so sweeping and bold to mask the turmoil I felt in class. But no matter the story I told my family, I formulated my retaliation before the next music class. I would not let the music teacher get away with using her position of authority to have fun at my expense, so I plotted. So the next week, I enlisted my classmates to join in an attack on the music teacher. I asked my classmates to vote for the popular song that I would bring to play at the end of the music class, because each week the teacher let us play a commercial song if we had performed her songs very well. So everyone sang great, and we earned that reward. The record I brought was Carly Simon's Dishonest Modesty, and the lyrics include 2 sexually explicit words, words that do not belong in an elementary school. So the inappropriate words rolled off the singer's lips and into the classroom of 6th graders. We burst into laughter, squeals, snorts, hoots. No one tried to contain it. We deserved the release after the force we had put into singing the teacher's songs. The teacher had been nodding her head in rhythm and enjoying the music, but the obscene lyrics caught her off guard. She realized that she did hear what she thought she had heard, and with the lightning speed of a javelin, she lunged at the record player. She tried to grab the arm of the device before more inappropriate words bounced off the walls. She stopped the music with a violent drag of the needle across the vinyl. She could not stop us from enjoying her pain, however. Flushing red in the face and most likely feeling battered by the waves of laughter, the teacher shut the record player with a thud and hastily shoved her teaching materials into her satchel. She barely looked up at the roaring preteens. I hoped she felt as I had felt the week before, the isolation, the powerlessness, both that she had visited on me. That was the last I saw of the music teacher. The following week, the homeroom teacher announced that our music program was over for the year. We students thought the teacher had been fired. Now, when I reflect on my display of revenge, I don't feel the satisfaction I felt that day. At the time, I enjoyed making the teacher as uncomfortable as she had made me. I liked watching her become the person in the room who was different from the others and whose difference had been singled out. Now, I realize something. If the music teacher had lost her job, then I affected the financial health of her family. She could have been a contributor to her family's bottom line as a wife, as a mother, or possibly the chief breadwinner. I am ashamed that innocents, my young classmates and the teacher's family, may have been harmed when I sought tit-for-tat revenge. So no, I did not go quietly after the worst day of my adolescent life. I took revenge. In today's terms, we'd say I terrorized the person I felt had terrorized me. I caused someone to face an economic hit. Maybe the episode disappeared from my memory, not because I felt isolated and abused, but because I felt extreme shame at my actions. And I am still ashamed, 40 years after my behavior. I had answered the imbalance of power, but the ugly truth is that I was guilty of forcing someone into the disadvantaged position of being the other in the group. So here's the question I have for someone who might read Civil Rights Baby. What do you think? What do you think about the way one person dominates another just because he can? What do you think about the way a group dominates another group at will just because it can? What I did in victimizing the music teacher, I have witnessed time and again in my industry, journalism. Have you seen it in yours? Dr. Cornel West says, people are creative about mistreating each other, and some of you might agree. I lived through intentional mistreatment by television managers, by my television colleagues, during my journalism career. This is despite the fact that I won the prestigious national award, the Radio and Television News Directors Michelle Clark Fellowship in 1989. While working, I personally knew 10 other African American women who faced the same intentional workplace abuses and sabotage. That is one of the reasons for writing this book. For the journalists who are still in that situation, I don't need a remedy, but I am motivated to be of service to those who do. I am motivated to help anyone who wants to pursue her dream or his dream in journalism. For anyone who needs the anti-discrimination laws of the United States to be followed. Anyone who today pedals home from school on her bicycle so that she can do an excellent job on her homework and so that she can launch herself into her career. To manifest her destiny, as we just heard Reginald Henderson say. My generation, the generation born and that began working after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we have not enjoyed the protections on paper. I am living proof. For me, exposing the abuses inside of the journalism industry can possibly make a difference for the people currently in their struggles. In the 5 years working on this book, I coined the term economic lynching to describe what has been happening to women's careers, Black women's careers, to my career. And again, as your previous speaker, Reginald Henderson, said, he talked about generational wealth. When economic lynching occurs, generational wealth cannot be passed down. Wealth cannot be created. So let me read one more section of Civil Rights Baby. Dictionaries employ stark language to define lynching, using expressions such as extrajudicial mob action or execution without legal authority, and even informal public execution, usually by hanging. But dictionaries do not explain the reasons for lynching. My opinion, based on research, is that in many cases, people in America's history lynched not because a person had committed a crime, but because a respectable Black person had achieved a measure of success. and someone was jealous of that success. Of course, in my career, no one tried to execute me. Instead, at more than one television station between 1986 and 2009, someone tried to kill my dreams. Someone executed judgment against me without first finding out what I knew and what I was capable of doing. Not a literal lynching, of course, but an act, I believe, born of the same type of jealousy that inspired this shameful legacy. Hence, an economic lynching. In private torment, even as I presented a professional and pleasant face to the world, I endured the effects of the jealousy, or whatever was the dark motive behind the actions. For years, I was afraid to speak about the nightmare. Not anymore. At the end of Civil Rights Baby, on page 347, I ask you to help me in speaking out, in revealing what is wrong, and in revealing what is happening. Whether you are a television viewer, a colleague of someone who works in the television industry, if you know someone you suspect is being mistreated at a television station, I want you to reach out to me on social media. I'm going to make calls about this. I'm going to call the broadcasters who are breaking the law. Why? During my career, I felt so much pressure to hold on to my job that on one day, I almost acted foolishly and threw it all away. I want to intercede before someone else is in that position. But that's a story you'll have to read in the book. I'm not going to share that one with you today. But as I close, I do want to tell you about the best event in my life, not just in my career, but in my life. And it is the day that I met Mrs. Rosa Parks, and we had private moments before the interview. I was working at a television station in Columbus, Georgia, and had to go to Tuskegee, Alabama. The city was naming a street for Mrs. Parks. Before the event, I saw Mrs. Parks standing alone. And because I was shooting my own video and working alone, I was free to walk over. I walked over to Mrs. Parks. We stood at about the same height, 5'3". She was turning 75 years old, and that was the occasion for the event. I walked up so close to her that I looked through her glasses, and she looked back at me calmly. As I prepared to extend my hand to say, "Hello, I'm Nita Wiggins," instead, something clicked. Her welcoming presence changed my demeanor and changed my actions. I said, "Mrs. Parks, I never do this, but may I hug you?" And Mrs. Parks, with her southern accent, sounding like my grandmother from Georgia, said, "Sure, baby." And we embraced. And in the grasp, in the embrace of the mother of the civil rights movement, something transferred to me. In the embrace, all of the street sounds faded. All I sensed was my heartbeat next to hers. It is the ultimate moment of my life. Then I realized maybe I have been inappropriate, so I released Mrs. Parks, and she was still holding me. Regretfully, our embrace ended, but from that day forward, I have decided that whatever I can do to advance the work of Mrs. Parks and the legions of civil rights and human rights and equality and social justice campaigners, I will do. That is one of the additional reasons for writing this book. Mrs. Parks appears in Civil Rights Baby, my book, in several occasions, and I hope that at some point you might understand the impact she has had on me. So I do thank you for listening, and I do thank the organizers for having an event as important as this, because when I talk about Mrs. Parks and her legacy and her impact, I will go wherever I have to go to spread those words. So thank you very much.
You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have